Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. We had an exciting weekend watching the Leadville 100 mountain bike race. This is always one of the most stressful weeks of my coaching year, so all went well. It was exciting. Great racing in the pro and amateur field. Some great stories. So kudos to everyone who started the race. We always say getting to these big races, period. Yeah, getting to the start line is a big deal. And then if you did so with a functioning bike and you were motivated and not overly injured, that is also a great success and something to celebrate regardless of how the next 6 to 12 hours went for you.
Yes, very exciting to watch so many people who've used our Leadville training plan, very highly regarded Leadville training plan, and who obviously worked with us with coaching or did consults. I feel like this was like a banner year for just the number of people using the plan, getting coaching for it. I think on our webinars leading up to the race, we had sort of record numbers of people.
Yeah, lots of people doing it. And I think, we appeal to that busy person who's maybe in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s who are taking on this Leadville challenge. So yeah, kudos to everyone who, again, however it went, even if you didn't get to the start line this year, for whatever reason, I think it's a great success. But yeah, we had a great year. I think some really cool stories that came out of the day.
Now, were there any things you can think of that were specific to your athletes who had a good day that they maybe did differently from what we're assuming some of the riders did wrong that had a rough day?
Yeah, I always look at the training beforehand. If someone's been consistent, it's not that they do miraculous 20-hour weeks. It's a lot of times it's what a normal busy person can do with a little extra effort, usually something in that 10 hours for the week, the total weekly volume. And that includes strength and yoga and in some cases even walking in that routine. This is just what fits into the 12 weeks, the 6 months before these big challenges for busy people. And so that's really the big thing. And so what would be a violation of that would be if there isn't that, they're not training 6 days a week, or enough volume. And then if there's big gaps, this could be family vacations, health stuff, injuries. You'll see a lot of the binge and purge type training, which I guess I should think of a better term for that, but on and off type training where it's full gas and then nothing because I'm injured or burnt out. Right. That's not the way to do it and to get consistency. And you'll see people with all different thresholds and body sizes and all the stupid stuff that gets talked about. Drop bars and flat bars were the big thing this year. And you saw a lot of flat bars, including the ones going across for the women's race with Kate Courtney. Lots of flat bars still doing fine. So you don't have to hop on the latest trends and the supplements and the bikes to do well. People have been doing well at this race for well over 20 years, just with normal mountain bikes and normal training. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, and it's a boring answer, is just consistency, right? Other big things would be just climbing. It tends to go better the more specific you can be. So this is climbing 2 times a week. You're going up hills that increasingly look more like a Leadville hill.
And I think the thing with Leadville is ultimately, it's actually not a ridiculous elevation gain race. If you look at it in context, it's just a couple of very, very long sustained climbs. That's what makes it tough, right? I know it's not quite the exact same course as the Leadville Trail Run, but the run is 10,000 feet of elevation, which is the same thing I did at Sulphur Springs, which did not feel, I would
which
not
is
have
just
said,
in Ontario, near Niagara Falls.
So I wouldn't call that a climbing race.
No, we were there on the weekend, and I would say it was not. There was hills on the route, but nothing is very long, and most of them were runnable.
But everyone talks about Leadville as this big climbing thing, and it's because while it's not a huge amount of elevation gain, it comes in 3 big punches, basically. So being able to do the sustained climb is really the big thing.
And I think just the fact that you see so much in the elite races and beyond now, talking about these drop bars and arrows. Keegan Swenson, who won, had fairings on his fork for aerodynamics. So what that it's telling telling you is that there's a lot of time where they're moving quite quickly on flat terrain. The group skills, even a couple of the athletes we worked with that were more in the 11 to 12 hour range were getting into groups, and especially on the way back, there's a headwind. So there's the aerodynamics, the wind matters. So then in a climbing race, you wouldn't think, if you were just going up and down hills, this would be less of a discussion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but yes, kudos to everyone doing Leadville. Anyone who's now got it on their bucket list for next year, check out the Leadville training plan and all of the coaching options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll put a bit about that in the coming weeks, I'm sure. But yeah, as we get towards the New Year's, or if you want to get started, I guess that would be the other thing when we're talking about consistency. The couple of athletes we had who it was a stretch. They're getting older. They're newer to mountain bike. They haven't done something like this. It's a big bucket list thing. They started in both cases like 2+ years out thinking about this. And so they maybe did a qualification race the year before, and then they worked on their skills with lots of time. They built up the volume, and then we trained like a normal Leadville year going into it, but they laid that foundation and that experience in the years before. So we think about that when we're talking about coaching, this like long-term vision and building towards future things. So so roadmap today, we have really just one topic. We're talking about saddle sores and sort of everything wrapped up in this concept of saddle sores. This is something you've written a book, which we should sort of talk about. We'll link to is saddle sore.
Saddle, sore, yep. A women-only guide to you and your bike. Although, obviously, men can read it. There's actually like quite a bit in there that goes for both sexes. And actually, I did add a chapter about the gentleman parts to the updated version that we put out in 2017, I believe, just because we were getting so many questions on that. And I figured, well, to be totally frank, most guys are not going to pick up a book about that because it's like the not asking for directions. Mm-hmm. I figured, there might be some friends, wives, girlfriends who could then pass that information on to the gentlemen in their lives who are walking like cowboys after a bike ride. Well,
and it's interesting how we look at things and what matters. It's pretty common that would be a limitation when you're coming through a training cycle. You'll say, "Oh, my legs are heavy. I feel tired. Maybe my gut's off." But things like numbness in the hands and obviously in the saddle region, they're big deals and things that we should really be taking even rest days if we have saddle sores before it becomes a large issue, because down the road, this can be surgery. This can be sitting differently on a saddle where we then end up with knee pain, hip pain, overuse injury that does affect your ability to actually get out and ride. So the comfort is a really, really big aspect. And when you find it, it's great and you try and hold on to it. So we're going to talk a little bit about definitions today of saddle sores, sort of the common types of things that might be considered under saddle pain irritations. And anything else we're going to touch on there? A couple, I guess, specific questions around it as well.
Yeah, exactly. Before we get into it, quick shout out to our sponsors over at Payable. So this is the Google Form add-on that lets you take payments in a Google Form. We use it for all different things, whether it's registrations for the local mountain bike club, or when I'm doing book sales in real life. I'll actually be, the day this comes out, I'll be at Joyride 150 Indoor Bike Park doing some shredding around, and I'll have obviously Shred Girl's books on sale, and I will be using the Google Form for that purpose. Super convenient, really easy way to take payments in a way that makes you not have to sign up for a bunch of extra stuff, pay subscription fees, etc. Mm-hmm. Just lets you work in a system you already know. Most people already have done Google Forms at some point. This makes it easy to get the information you need and take a payment all in one place.
Sure. Really, for the people who maybe don't have a website, so you can use the Google Forms as sort of the place you're linking to. And then also someone who doesn't have a point of sale, one of these things for the credit card to tap. You don't have these types of things. So this would be a perfect thing for that. We have clubs using it. We have food basket people who sell food baskets, that type of thing, farmers market, jersey orders, t-shirt orders, parties, wedding registries. There's all sorts of things, really anything you can use a Google Form for. So we have a page you can link to get a bit of discounts and sort of direct links.
Yep. Payableapps.com/athlete has all of our favorite templates and some good savings on your square fees, etc. So definitely check that out. We'll include a link in the show notes, and let's talk about nether regions.
Okay. So when we're talking about a saddle sore, I think you could be very specific with what that means, but I think it's often a global term, at least the way I see it used and maybe how I use it. So when you're thinking about saddle sores, how would you sort of define what a saddle sore would be?
Yeah, so the specific definition of like an actual saddle sore would be basically like a painful pimple in your nether regions is the easiest way to put it.
This is like the perineum, so it's sort of between...
Well, you can also have it on just like your inner thigh.
Okay.
For women, there's a lot more like folds and other various pieces of skin that you could have
So it
this
could
issue
be
on.
anywhere, between. So wherever your saddle might contact.
And certainly, I think actually one of the spots that gets kind of missed often is that where your butt meets your leg, like that fold there, I think is like a really common
Sort of
spot
like beside
for it.
your butt cheek.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had that a little bit, and sometimes it's like the chamois is maybe like the seam on the outside of like the outline of the
That
chamois.
can definitely happen.
Or sometimes it's like the saddle can be maybe poorly sized to your butt, basically.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, just honestly, heat rash is a very big like reason we get this in the summer, right? Like you're kind of creating this environment where you have, especially with like a thick chamois. If you think about the rest of you is wearing really like lightweight, really breathable stuff, but then the chamois, which is there to reduce friction, can actually end up leading to heat rash, which can then kind of present as a saddle sore. So the other thing with saddle sores is like sometimes people say saddle sore, what they really mean is like a spot of chafing, like spot that looks like chafing, but is actually a rash, more of like a dermatitis or folliculitis kind of situation, which is more ingrown hairs.
So it's really anything that like that chamois short area can contact, anywhere sort of between your legs, maybe even like up onto your legs, you're saying, and it could look like a pimple, a sore, a rash, chafing, even opening up into like an actual open wound in some cases. Not to be graphic, this might get graphic at times. So really just anything like that when you sit on your seat, you're like, ow, this hurts, more than usual.
And typically, like when we say saddle sore, we mean more in the skins, like the skin thing. We do have a couple questions that are actually more like my
Almost becoming
tailbone
deep.
hurts,
Yeah,
more of this like
numbness or pain.
Yeah, more, and that's more of like a we'll call muscular or skeletal kind of nerve kind of situation. Where
Could be under. I don't know if you'd say I have a saddle sore. I guess someone could, but that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. So when we say saddle sore, we just mean the skin part, and then if we're talking about numbness or anything like that, we'll kind of refer to it slightly differently because saddle sore you can usually, clear up. You need to kind of figure out why it's happening, but saddle sores will generally resolve themselves in a couple of days if you just spend some time off the bike, keep them clean, but they're skin issues.
Mm-hmm. So then there's a few things that can happen is if you've been training well or maybe not, and it hasn't been an issue, and then suddenly you go and do, like the other couple weeks ago, I said I did longest ride I've done in a long time. We were out, it was very hot, and we were out for 8 hours, and I rode the longest I've ridden. We were out pedaling for 190 kilometers. So this is, especially as a mountain biker, this is a lot of time seated, just pedaling in a similar position. And so I didn't actually come away with any saddle sores from that. But if I did, I wouldn't go immediately to changing my position because I also it was just such an irregular thing. In the same way that like my quads were sore, maybe I would get a bit of back soreness or neck soreness or hands even going a little numb. It's sort of at some point, it's like your body has been hinged over and been, in this case, your butt's touching the saddle for 8 hours. It's not abnormal to have your body complaining a little bit. So in that case, I wouldn't necessarily make a change.
For sure. The reason you would start kind of trying to troubleshoot a saddle sore is if it's consistent, if it keeps coming back, if it keeps becoming an issue, whether you're doing a 60-minute ride or a 4-hour ride. If every time you go over 4 hours, you happen to have like a little bit of irritation, honestly, that's not really anything to worry about. We can troubleshoot it. We can add chamois cream. We can maybe try to like test different, even shorts would be like, I probably wouldn't change a saddle, but I'd maybe try a different, like only wear my favorite set of shorts for the longer rides kind of thing. Right. But yeah, if it's recurring, if it keeps happening, especially if it's in the same place, that's usually a really good sign that we need to change something.
Okay. So it could be, I guess we have to be orderly about this. So maybe that's like sort of, okay, we've defined it. We have sort of some things that maybe aren't as concerning if you're really exceeding it. And then we're saying maybe if you have a new saddle or a new bike, or you've just started training and you're like, every time I ride, I either get this, or now it's starting to build upon previous rides and getting worse and worse, or just persisting, then these would be things that you'd want to look at bike fit. Maybe you don't have great shorts, or you haven't started using biking shorts. One of your favorite things is to let people know that they don't wear underwear under cycling chamois, like under a cycling short.
Yeah, and that could actually be a really common reason you end up with saddle sores, because the chamois people tend to think that the chamois pad is there to provide padding, which is partially true, but actually chamois were originally designed in order to prevent friction. So there's a reason that the chamois pad is like bigger than your nether regions, right? There's a reason it kind of goes onto your inner thigh. And that's because it's supposed to avoid having any points of friction between, you and the chamois. And when we add underwear, we're adding these friction points. We're adding a material that wasn't really made to be pressed into the saddle in that particular way. So if you think about, the scratching of the edge of your underwear just over and over again, every pedal stroke, it's just scratching you just a tiny bit. You're gonna have these tiny, abrasions, basically, even if you can't see them. And that's where bacteria can get in. And that's how we end up with saddle sores. Mm-hmm. So basically, saddle sores are created due to a confluence of friction and bacteria. So the friction causes the micro tears, and then the bacteria, which, if you've ridden a bike for a while and you've taken off your chamois at the end, you recognize that it's sweaty down there. If you've gone through a mud puddle or something, it's also a little muddy or mucky. It's just pretty gross. So you do have bacteria just having a grand old time down there. And then if you add these little tiny tears, you get bacteria in them, and boom, we have these, basically like pimple type things that can be very uncomfortable. Or we end up with dermatitis, that like skin rash that's caused again by abrasion plus bacteria.
Okay. So we might look at common things we'd see then in these sort of more minor initial phases would be a saddle that's not aligned. It's not straight. Mm-hmm. We could see a setup that's poor. So maybe your saddle's too far or too back, but usually the biggest one to look for is that your saddle should generally be flat or even slightly downward tilted when you look at it from the side, and the bike should be level. And this does get complicated to adjust and to ensure it's not too far pointed down. But this does sort of hint around if you are new to this, or maybe if you haven't had a bike fit and you are someone who's struggling consistently with bike fit related issues, whether that's saddle sore or other pain, numbness of the hands, back pain, this type of thing, then a bike fit is a fantastic idea. We did have Tim on just recently from Speed River talking about bike fit. That was a few episodes ago, so you can go back and listen to some of those tips. Yeah,
we are huge fans of bike fits for sure. They can be so helpful for solving a whole number of ills. And I mean, the issue with the bike fit is everything impacts everything. So even if your saddle feels okay, if you aren't putting enough weight on your hands because your handlebars are at kind of the wrong height for you, that can impact how much pressure you're putting on your sit bones. Mm-hmm. If your saddle's a little too high, if you then think about how you're pedaling, you're, pressing down harder into the saddle with every pedal stroke because, as your foot goes down, your whole leg is going down further. So now you're creating kind of this like rocking motion that you're doing. So it's all part of the same thing. Kinesiologists would call this more of like a fascia.
I don't know if we would, but someone would. So yeah, it is all interacting, depending on where your cleat position is and your handlebar position are going to affect how you're interacting at that saddle height. So that would be worth considering. Now, if you have, you've been tweaking it, and again, it's continuing, then we would say bike fit. The one thing, I guess maybe we go over red flags, like anything that's nervy pain, numbness, you need to look at, like, don't keep persisting and going out riding. You need to either make an adjustment to fix it on your own or go see someone, because you can't do that long term. Like that's like red flags, like pain, numbness, that shouldn't, a little bit of discomfort and skin irritation. You can try and figure that out over a series of rides, changing the saddle, tweaking your position. We love that. I think that's fine. But sort of as we get to these more red flags of nervy pain, numbness, maybe we can do that next question with the bony tailbone stuff in a second. These are things that immediately I would be thinking either changing the saddle, because the saddle just immediately is not for you. If you're pretty sure that it's not tilted up and you're sitting on the nose of the saddle, then I would be looking to a bike fit or something to try and figure that out. But I would say if it's obvious, the immediately you sit on this bike and it just isn't good, and then you're having any of these red flag, nervy pain, numbness, then we would say the saddle just isn't for your body, which isn't uncommon, right? With the saddle that comes on one bike shouldn't be the saddle that every single person who uses that bike uses. It doesn't make sense with the amount of body shapes, genders, all these things that can affect how a saddle interacts.
Yeah, and I talked about this at the Rooted Mountain Bike Festival in New York, where we had a bunch of women. Like, honestly, it's the biggest saddle talk I've done, and I think we had over 50 women sitting listening to me talk about this, which terrifying, but also really, really cool. And the saddle was a huge conversation because so many people, you assume the saddle that came on the bike is the best saddle for the bike. Frankly, it's the saddle that's the cheapest to manufacture in bulk and fits the greatest number of people. Like, it's sort of the average saddle size, but that is by no means the right size for you. So one thing I always suggest is when you are getting a new bike or you are looking for a saddle, definitely make sure that they're measuring your sit bones at the bike shop. And usually they do this with this thing that you basically sit on. It's like a gel pad and it shows you where your sit bones are. And apologies if anyone's heard me say this before, but your size has nothing to do with the width of your sit bones. Like, I always give the example of my dad is 5'10", 300 pounds, big man. Tiny sit bones. His sit bones are narrower than mine. But obviously, if you look at us, you would probably assume that, he needs a bigger saddle. No, Dad actually needs a really narrow saddle. I need a slightly wider saddle. So you just can't go on, I'm a bigger person, so I need a wider saddle. In fact, a lot of the times people do that and they end up really uncomfortable because if your saddle is too wide for your sit bones get kind of compressed towards the middle of the saddle. And that actually leads to more of like the nerve pain. Like the saddle sores they're still an issue, but the nerve pain is actually the bigger issue when your saddle's too wide.
Yeah, you can't go through like that. So you don't want nervies because this is long-term damage when we're talking down there, right? So then we would change out the seat. That's very important. But again, that nosed up saddle, if you think about it, that's something that can then get up into, as Molly says, the nether regions and perhaps be touching bone or again, sensitive tissue. So sometimes that nosing down the saddle slightly, we're talking a degree, half a degree, it can be the fix. But sometimes, as Molly says, the saddle width or type, some people like the cutout in the middle and some don't. And so that's where it's just, that isn't for you. Use a different saddles. Borrow one. Some shops will have lending libraries. Every friend you have, like we have 3 saddles just in the storage closet right now that are all different. So if you ask your friends, they're going to have old saddle, and it doesn't even matter. Like, just try a different one and see if your experience on the bicycle changes. If you try every saddle and it's always the same experience, then I would go look to a doctor or a physio who can then help you, because you might have something else related to posture or muscle activation or something like that. So I think that's sort of red flags, which is good. We talked about changing the saddle. We talked about bike fit. Where do you want to go from there?
Well, do you want to talk about this tailbone question that we got?
Well, let's do that. So we had a friend who got an new e-bike. Handlebars often on newer bikes, period, but also these more trail bikes and e-bikes will come pretty high. So they're going to the handlebars are going to be set up higher. They're not going to have a big drop stem, often riser bars now. Every bike's coming with a really short stem. So the person ends up sitting very upright. So if you think about sitting on a chair where your torso is upright, versus if you watched Kate Courtney at Leadville or any of the road cyclists in the Tour de France Femmes, you would see a torso that's almost horizontal, if that makes sense. They're very bent over. Mm-hmm. So what a difference if you think about the force going into your tailbone, into your hips on the saddle. If someone's sitting vertically versus being hinged over, maybe they're on aero bars. Just think about someone on aero bars. Where is the weight being distributed versus someone like our friend who is sitting very upright? Your hands basically have no pressure on them when you're sitting upright in this very recreational trail position. And so the saddle required for those two people is different, which we'll talk about in a second, the types of saddle. We need to remember that. But then for our friend, he was saying, my tailbone, like hours, days after he rode, he said, my tailbone hurts when I'm seated. And I said, well, this is a red flag. We don't want this to happen. So then we were saying, well, it's either we should change that position because he is a good enough rider that he shouldn't be so upright. He's going to notice cornering sucks and it's just hard to get into position. It's hard to maybe lift the front wheel or something like that. But then we said maybe the saddle is just either too narrow or pointed upwards. There was maybe a bit of a pointed upwards, but we said the saddle probably just isn't the one for you. Like that just seems red flag. You shouldn't have pain the next day from a bicycle ride.
No, especially yes, you might have some skin issues the next day if you have a saddle sore situation. They don't necessarily clear up in 24 hours, but pain, absolutely not. That's the reddest of red flags.
So this is where we said, okay, we'll drop these bars quick, a couple spacers on top of the stem. This is a little technical for those who aren't bike mechanic type people, but hopefully that makes sense. We're lowering the handlebars in effect. He may have to look at a dropper or a stem that's either flipped over or even some of these more negative stems. But the biggest thing is just normalizing the saddle tilt so that the nose isn't pointed up. To make sure that wasn't a factor. But we said, I think he's just going to change the saddle because that just, to me, the saddle, even poorly aligned, not set up, you shouldn't, next day pain, not a thing. So that would be a good case study there. And again, where we get some of these recreational or trail bikes and the e-bikes, especially if your shop isn't really looking into who you are and how you're going to ride your bike and setting it up, it's very common that handlebars come way too high for how most people are going to ride.
For sure. Okay. So.
I did mention, do you want to talk a bit about the types of saddle a little bit? Sort of what your goals are and how the saddle, this is a bit of a Trek thing, but I think all the brands do this a little bit.
Okay. Let's give the spiel.
So again, if you take our friend and maybe just Beach Cruiser would be the most obvious example. So Trek, I can't recall how it goes, but I think there's maybe a range of 7 types of saddles going from Beach Cruiser, which let's call that a 1. It doesn't matter if it's true or not, but the upright all the way to time trial, super aggressive triathlon. This would be our road cyclists in the tour where they're the most aggressive, the most hinged over. And so as you start moving forward, you can think about your nether regions, which we're going with Molly's term on this, slowly rotating towards the saddle. So you can see as you get into a more aerodynamic bent over position, that nose of the saddle is going to become more and more of an issue and closer to those sensitive regions. So the idea would be that there's different styles of saddle, whether you're beach cruising, or maybe you're a downhill rider, or maybe you're enduro, maybe you're XC, maybe you're road, maybe your time trial. And that would be that spectrum from beach cruiser to the time trialist that we want to saddle. And effectively what happens is the nose becomes less and less prominent, perhaps more downward facing. The saddle might be shorter. There's a few different iterations of this, but when you look at something like the Specialized Power saddle would be one of the more aggressive normal saddles that a road cyclist or an aggressive XC mountain biker or gravel rider might look at something like that. And all the brands have some variation of that, whatever saddle manufacturer you love. So that would be the idea, is just making sure that your bike, if it came with a whatever saddle, because a lot of times they just, here you go, middle of the road saddle. You may be an aggressive rider who's racing, training, maybe doing some of this Leadville, Unbound, that type of stuff, where you need to get a saddle that's more aggressive. And it can be a game changer to have one of these saddles that's set up for the position you're going to sit in for hours and hours and hours. So I would definitely look into that. If you're not if you don't already have the saddle that you love and you haven't bought 5 copies of it, then this would be something to definitely look at. Do I have a saddle that matches the style of riding that I'm doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think saddle is definitely one of those things that it kind of sucks to have to buy a new saddle because frankly, they're not cheap. Mm-hmm. But the difference it can make, and you just had this with one of your coaching clients, right? He got a new saddle and it's the clouds parted, angels sang.
Yeah, and this was one of these saddle sores that just had existed for a long time. And now there's no saddle sore.
I will say for some people, you kind of almost get a calloused over saddle sore basically, which not ideal just from a general skin health perspective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So then you're starting to be functional with it. They're still performing well. It doesn't even necessarily hurt most of the time. Maybe they do a bit of extra. They have a chamois cream sort of protocol that they do to get through the bigger rides.
The number of chamois cream protocols that I've now heard,
certain brand, maybe you're layering the brands only
Oh,
on the
yeah.
right. So yeah, and now there isn't. So this is the thing where anytime it's not just today because I rode 190K once, like I didn't stress that day because like, oh, by the end I didn't want to sit on the saddle anymore. But if it would then just kept going, then that's an issue. And so in the case of this athlete, they're getting ready for a big multi-day type camp trip type thing. So anything you can do to make comfort is going to just make the thing more enjoyable, avoid a possible reason you might have to end up dropping out, or just that performance is going to drop because you're having to stop and shift and stand up or just pedal weird. Right. But just not to be in pain. You have that choice. So yeah, definitely something to look into and explore.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about chamois cream quickly here. So chamois cream, if you haven't seen it before, it's specifically basically like a heavy-duty lotion. Picture like a Noxema kind of consistency, I would say. That's basically meant to fight friction on your ride. So people do it wrong all the time or use it wrong all the time. So quickly, when you're using a chamois cream, think quarter size amount applied to the area where you have the issue. Don't just like splat a bunch of it into your chamois and then kind of hoik your shorts up and just hope that it hits the right
Now,
spots.
that used to be, they used to do like a moisture or like a conditioner for the leather chamois. So
Yeah.
that's some of that has persisted through the generations where you apply the chamois cream to the chamois, which is logical that you put the chamois cream on the chamois, but you do not really do that anymore.
Well, that's because they thought labia cream written on the box would be like not overly like you wouldn't
in other
wanna,
regions.
yeah, you wouldn't want to carry that like in your bag or like buy it in the store. Like I think the name just basically was because it would be really and like then obviously then it's well, men can't use this. They need perineum cream or junk cream. I don't know. Anyway.
Fair enough.
Anyway, chamois cream goes directly on the spots where you're having issues. Think small amount. You do not need a lot. If you use a lot, you're going to create kind of a slip and slide condition. And I mean, there is a reality that using chamois cream is adding to the nice breeding ground for bacteria situation. So in my opinion, there will be people that will use chamois cream on every ride and have no issue. In my opinion, if you need to use chamois cream on every ride, you need to figure out why that is and solve for that because you don't really want to need chamois cream. Ideally, I say if you can go, you should be able to go 2 hours without chamois cream.
I guess that's it. Yeah. And so maybe I knew on that 190K ride that it's going to be testing the limits. So I did use a little bit that day, but just, I know that sort of on the right side, there tends to be more. And so I just put a bit extra, or I just put some that day, but like a chamois tube for me will generally last like years.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you're going through one a month, like you have an issue that needs to be addressed.
And probably there are some people, some skin, some riding frequency. Some people ride a lot, right? So we're not saying that you're wrong, but they might be a hint that maybe you could look at a different saddle, or maybe your chamois are getting old or not as good quality for the amount of riding you're doing. And rather than investing in chamois cream, you could invest in that. And again, just what a win if you didn't have to rely on that and you were probably more comfortable.
Well, and the thing is, chamois cream does break down the chamois faster. And chamois do wear out, right? They have foam in them. They have like the fabric in them. Again, if you're thinking about the friction, the number of times it's being pressed against, like it does wear out. So if you're starting to have issues when you never had them before, when was the last time you got a new pair of shorts? It might be that you just need to get a new pair. The other thing that you absolutely should not do, I mean, yes, there's going to be some bike packers who are currently on like the transcontinental divide that are like, hey, this works for me. Don't use Vaseline or any petroleum-based products as chamois cream. Very bad from a bacteria standpoint. Very bad from a getting it out of your chamois standpoint. In fact, it actually voids the warranty on almost every chamois. If you try to
chamois warranty, eh? Like I guess more for ripping and sort of thing. Yeah, okay.
But it wrecks the chamois because it's almost impossible to get out. I mean, think about like the oil spill. Think about the oil spills, right? Like Exxon Valdez issue. Think about the ducks. Remember the ducks that had to be washed with
I think they just used Dawn. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is
like soap, yeah.
Ducks have like feathers that are meant to like be like washed off.
Right.
Your chamois, that Vaseline, unless you're scrubbing the crap out of it with Dawn, which is actually going to mess up the fabric itself because now you're scrubbing it really hard. The Vaseline is just not going to come out. So you've now created an even more hostile like breeding ground for bacteria.
Sure.
So try to avoid using Vaseline as chamois cream, please. I know people say that it lasts longer and that's why they do it. The problem is it lasts forever in your kit. Also, like, Vaseline just isn't really, it's smothering your skin. It's not really meant for that like daily purpose. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's my chamois rant. I'm trying to think through. Okay, so we did get a question from an older rider who hasn't changed anything but is suddenly having issues, and more like a rash-based issue. And I thought this one was super interesting because it brings up a few important points. Number one, as we age, our skin is bound to change. Skin does get thinner. If you're a woman and you are on hormone replacement therapy in like the menopause years, you are going to experience thinner skin down there. Like that's just an unfortunate reality. So there may be, things that worked before are suddenly not working, and you do have to kind of try a bunch of new stuff. You might need a new saddle. You might need new shorts. You might need to start using chamois cream, especially if you are kind of dealing with more of a dryness situation.
Mm-hmm. And it, again, could be a saddle thing where maybe you were getting by with the saddle and now it's time for a new one.
Yeah. The other thing that this guy actually had me thinking of, though, is it could actually be that something else has changed that has nothing to do with you. The way he was describing the rashes actually made me think it could be more of an allergy or an irritation. And he said he hadn't changed anything soap-wise or detergent-wise, but the fact is detergents and soaps change their formulation sometimes.
Right.
So, we are very big fans of using unscented everything, scented like stuff for sensitive skin. So our detergents are like dye-free, fragrance-free. We double rinse everything. I usually use pre-wash, especially if it's sweaty. The goal is to really get everything clean and then also get all of the soap out of your shorts, because if suddenly, if you used, say, Tide detergent, they could have changed their formulation and put something in that is suddenly causing you personally irritation. Not to say that it's like a skin irritant for everyone, just that, hey, they might have changed their fragrance slightly and now whatever they're using is irritating to you.
And I would do, because there's the clear and whatever, and then there's also free and clear, and there's like 3 different white dermatologist whatever ones just in Tide. So I wouldn't be surprised if you use a more traditional one. I would just try the more dermatologist free and clear one. But I wouldn't be surprised the other ones, the amount they change the colors and the whatever, that maybe there has been a tweak there. And then if you're not the one always doing the laundry, you never know, you get switched around or you travel. And then this isn't even talking about things like the dryer bounce sheets and the softeners and that sort of thing, which we don't really use those things. Some people like to, but again, those smells, like if the smell is still in the fabric, I know it doesn't smell like sweat now, but it does, there is potentially something there. So if there's any chance that stuff could be, especially more on the skin irritation, less of the sore pimple and more of the like irritated skin rash, that would be something to try right away. Would be just, can we go to a more basic soaps and your washing detergent and see if that resolves.
Yeah. And on the note of doing your laundry, always make sure you rinse your shorts inside out so the chamois is actually like getting water on it, because if you've ever done your laundry and not turned your chamois inside out, sometimes the chamois gets kind of just jammed together in the wash and you end up with a chamois that maybe got wet but did not get clean at all.
Mm-hmm. So and you could see the soap even getting in on that sponge and then just sitting in there.
Yeah, remember, you're literally putting a sponge into the washing machine, right?
Okay, so that's, I love that you brought up the detergent. There's, are there any other of those sort of like common things that sort of get overlooked outside of, the bike fits may be logical, the saddles may be logical. Is there anything else that you think of that people sort of forget about?
Well, in this guy's case, I actually suggested he might want to get a referral to a dermatologist to check out the rash, because there is a chance if you have more of a recurring rash situation that you actually have a fungal infection or an actual bacterial infection that's going to need to get cleared up by antibiotics.
Well, and I've had a bit of like eczema, psoriasis even, and sometimes that stuff happens down there in those nearby regions and then only gets aggravated by getting rubbed and more friction on it. So there could be, yes, being aggravated by saddle, but maybe not being caused by saddle. And again, some of the detergents and soaps can then aggravate that sort of stuff. And if that's a new thing in your life, again, something that you'd have to go down. But usually the dermatologists have like a list. Like that's actually how we ended up with this list, was seeing a dermatologist and saying like, these are the ones that they recommended. And we just sort of switched out soap and washing detergent.
Mm-hmm. And then the last thought as far as things you can change is, how are you riding? A lot of people kind of lock in, especially if you're more of a roadie. You lock into one position. If you're on Zwift, you like never stand up. You just sit down on the bike and you haven't moved at all. But the thing is, often that ends up leading to a saddle sore in one spot. Whereas if you just keep standing up every few minutes, just even like unweighting the saddle slightly and sitting back down, you're changing your position just by millimeters, not significantly, but just those couple millimeters can really give certain tissues a break and let you avoid a lot of these issues. So definitely make sure you're standing up on the bike, getting some movement going. Give your tailbone a little shake out. That might even also like help with some of the numbness, chafing stuff, because some of the numbness can actually be caused by almost your nether regions going to sleep, for lack of a better term, right? It's like pins and needles almost.
For sure. And the title page of your book, the cover of your book, I think both iterations of it had you sort of standing on the saddle, because that was a big aspect of that book, or a component of that book, was this stand up. Because you can get away with even a not great saddle if you're standing up more often. This is why mountain bikers, I don't think you see a downhill rider ever talk about saddle sores. They don't really sit on their saddle, except for when they're just sort of hanging around. And mountain bikers, it would be less frequent. And then as you go from road to group ride to longer randonneering, and certainly the indoor Zwifting stuff where people are standing much less, you see much higher frequency of saddle pain and discomfort. So that would be definitely the thing, is explore standing. And a lot of people do not stand in a coordinated way. They can maybe stand in a ready position with level pedals, but they certainly can't pedal for any extended period standing. And so one of the challenges or drills we give out is this 10-minute challenge. You set the timer like you would for an interval, and you pretend if you have a dropper post, you drop your post. If you don't, you're on a road bike or whatever, then you just no sitting. You just pretend the post or the seat broke and you have to get home. If you want, set it up like that, like no sitting until you get home. Do it in a safe area where you're not going to swerve around or anything. But you can stand, you can coast, you can put your cranks however you want. You can pedal or not pedal or be intermittent, but you can't sit down for 10 minutes and your bike wheels need to be moving. And you will find that you are all in tears and need to sit down in most cases, and don't feel bad about that. But there's your challenge. Figure it out. And there's definitely a way to get through that if you work away at it. And there's a bit of fitness, training the muscles to do it, but it's mostly coordination and just figuring out sort of the motion.
Love it.
And to be clear, you don't generally stand for 10 minutes straight. This is
that's not like an everyday.
Just a challenge. But I love Molly's thing. People will set the Garmin timer for their drinks, like a drink or eat every 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. But you could also use that as a little hop out of the saddle just to reposition yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, hopefully that shed some light on some issues that people are dealing with. But the TLDR of this, or TLDL, too long didn't listen, of this is, if you're having issues, you should try to figure out what is going on and fix it, because there's way too many people that just kind of assume this is all part and parcel of just biking and this is normal and this is, this is the price you pay to ride your bike. But this is not the case. This should not be the case. You should be able to ride without being in pain. So figure it out.
That's right. And we are here to support. That's certainly a common phone or Zoom consult that I will do, is just sort of talking through it. And often I can help guide it. And we often will do something like set up your bike on the trainer and we take a look at it. But in lieu of that, also, I think it's great to just spend and go see your local shop for either a bike sizing or someone like Tim, who we mentioned at Speed River, who does actual bike fitting. And often there's levels of bike fitting where they'll do, again, that sizing or saddle setup almost separate from the full-on deluxe bike fit. So definitely look into getting help. People are there, including us, to help you.
Perfect. All right. With that, we will leave you. Please make sure you're subscribed, rate, review, etc. And happy training. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.